When I was learning competitive Splatoon 2, I got a lot of advice from teammates and even coaches along the lines of, play more aggressively, you're a T-Tech, you need to be pushing the enemy team. So I'd take that advice into games for the next week. I'd end up dying a lot, feeding in at bad times, losing a lot of games single-handedly. Then I'd get the advice that I wasn't playing safely enough, so then I'd work on keeping myself from getting splatted, but I'd watch my teammates end up in fights I was too far away from and go down, and then I'd be told to play more aggressively again. The problem here is that the decision of whether to play aggressively or passively is too complex to simplify to an absolute play this way all the time sort of instruction. If all you give someone is play more aggressively, that's often bad advice, because it's really only specific situations where you need them playing more aggressively. If they start playing more aggressively across the board, that'll make it so that at times when they've been taking it slower and that's the appropriate response to the situation, the blanket feedback will cause them to make the wrong call and overcommit themselves. If you tell someone to play more passively to try and prevent them from feeding, you'll get them to survive more, but you'll often cause them to stop having a valuable impact on the game in some situations where they could have made a difference. This speaks to a larger issue of critical thinking and problem solving. If I were still teaching English classes and I decided to run a debate, one of the important criteria I'd establish for making counter-arguments is that you can't just argue that there's a problem or downside with someone's position. You have to propose a better position to replace theirs. I've been in meetings before where some members of the group would passionately complain about some aspect of their workplace. These complaints would often bog meetings down, causing them to take an hour or more longer than they were scheduled for, and often resulted in nothing useful but emotional venting for those complaining. One of the best managers I've ever worked with had a great solution to that. He just asked what they wanted us to do about their complaints. What's the solution? Do you have a better way for us to do things than we're doing them currently? Often the complainers hadn't even really thought things through that far, but occasionally they got a rough scrap of an idea together and the manager could quickly and incisively explain why that solution either wasn't going to work or caused problems in other areas that were even less desirable. If a complaint were more useful, though, and a solution came out of it, we got to that solution quickly, made a resolution to implement it, figured out how that would work, and never had to hear all the complaining. Those were some of the most effective meetings I've ever attended, because they were focused on solving a problem, not complaining about it. A lot of medicines have really nasty side effects that nobody likes. Psychoactive drugs for mental illnesses change your state of mind in a lot of ways, sometimes not just the ways you want them to. Chemotherapy is exhausting and makes your hair fall out, but people are very reasonably going to choose those treatments anyway until there's a better alternative with more manageable side effects, because as rough as they might be, they're better than just receiving no treatment a lot of the time. See something evil that's caused by your current economic or legal system and want to get rid of it? You'd better have a really good understanding of more than just that one problem you want fixed. There are many, many problems that your system is meant to solve, and you need plans to also solve them better with your new system. You'd also better have a stable path to implementing that new plan that isn't vulnerable to outside attack or corruption at any point on the timeline. Don't like the restaurant I decided we go to? Then actually suggest one that you would like to go to instead of making me run down the list of all 17 restaurants I know in the area and saying no to all of them. You know, hypothetically, of course. What's happening when someone gets told, you played too aggressively, is that someone's pointing out a problem with the play, but the solution they're suggesting is too broad. It doesn't deal enough with the complexities of the game, and so even though the criticism's correct for that particular play, that play is too specific a situation for the criticism to be useful. That exact fight probably won't play out again the same way. The next time you take a fight in that same place, maybe playing aggressively is the correct choice because you're up against a different weapon, or they're taking a different position, or this time they're distracted. The proposed solution isn't necessarily going to cause better plays given different preconditions that are just as likely as these. Sometimes this kind of advice can come from teammates who may be frustrated that the game didn't go the way they wanted, and that can creep into the way they're dealing with it. Telling someone to play differently can feel like a constructive comment, something intended to help that player improve, when really, psychologically, the function of the statement is just to absolve yourself of feeling like a loss was your fault, and not enough care is being given to the criticism to actually result in the adjustment needed to win the game. We often think our emotions line up really well with our goals, but in fact we have to be really careful about incentive systems that make us feel like we weren't the reason things went wrong, instead of helping things go right next time. What the coach or teammate needs to actually be pointing out isn't that a player needed to play more aggressively, but what information they should have collected that would have told them whether or not to play it aggressively. A better piece of advice would be, you have a numbers advantage here and you're near your teammates. Even if you just go down right away, chances are better you've got teammates to trade back, and even trading is a win because then you just keep your numbers advantage for longer. You're also more likely to win cleanly, because you can set up a 2v1 more easily than they can set one up on you. Now, instead of making your student play more aggressively, you've made them play more aggressively if they have a numbers advantage to work with. And that's a much better rule to follow than just play more aggressively all the time. Sure, there are going to be some cases where the rule doesn't work perfectly, but someone who very rigidly follows that conditional rule, even occasionally to their detriment, is nevertheless going to do a lot better than someone who rigidly follows the overly broad rule. So progress has still been made. We've still arrived at a better alternative, and from there the player themselves can figure out more specific rules to follow by thinking about the exceptional situations in a more granular way. Every weapon is going to play more aggressively some of the time and more passively at other times. Sure, some weapons are going to benefit from deciding to play aggressively in more situations than others, but even an E-leader needs to move up and take more advanced positions after its team wins a fight. And even Tetras need to wait for an opportune moment to engage before they push in sometimes. Instead of just deciding you need to play more aggressively or more passively, the way you're actually going to learn to play aggressively and passively at the right time is by trying to figure out when you should play one way or the other. One really good general answer to that question is to play aggressively when you have an advantage, and passively when you're at a disadvantage. Now, instead of thinking, I have to play more aggressively and ignoring warning signs and going in, you're actively looking for whether you're likely to win if you go in. You're looking for numbers advantages, paint on the ground, map control, enemy and friendly positions, specials that are active or available, information that tells you, if I pick a fight right now, are the odds in my favor? This will cause you to select opportunities to play aggressively more appropriately, and make those aggressive plays more impactful, but also less risky at the same time. Hopefully, this has helped you pick your fights better in Splatoon, coach other players better, choose medical treatment plans, be more successful in your efforts to pick a restaurant, manage a meeting, or overthrow a government. These, however, are the only applications you're allowed to use this information for. Any other utility you find from this thought process is strictly forbidden and punishable by push-ups. You have been warned.